In this lesson, I'll be discussing how to create an efficient version of the mesh for use in games or other situations in which you need to keep the complexity low. A lot of the techniques I'll be doing here, I'll be discussing in the context of games, but many of the concepts are transferable for film and VFX work. For example, a version such as the one we'll make can be useful even if you aren't using a game engine, since it can be used as a background object or a stand-in or proxy object. Some of the techniques are more specialized for games, but I think it's all useful knowledge for artists to have. I'll just take the lowest subdivision level and then ramp it up to a few more subdivisions. So let's go a little higher in ZBrush here. I'll get it so it's a couple hundred thousand verts or something. There we go. That should be good. And now I'll export this one. So I'll just call this rock ref. This is just a temporary garbage file. We can export a much lower version of this as well. So let's start with this lower one. Add some polygons to it. So I'll just call this rock starter. Okay, so I've just exported it, so I have a reference object that is higher polygon, and I've got a starter object that's much lower polygon. So we'll go into Maya and take a look at these. Now there is a really useful counter. There's a poly count heads up display that you can add. So if we go up here to display, heads up display, and we grab poly count, it'll give us some information here about the scene. Keep in mind, if you turn this on when you have a live surface, sometimes Maya will get buggy and show you like the wrong poly counts and everything here. But what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to show us the entire scene on the left, just the selection in the middle here, and that's the object selection, and then just the component selection on the right. So if I have like 3 faces selected, it should say 3 faces there. If those faces are all quads, then the triangles would be 6, because every one of those quads is 2 triangles. So in Maya, I'll import our reference object. I'll set this object up the same way that I did for the reference when I was working on creating the new topology for the rock. So essentially for that, I'm just going to apply a new material. I'll apply a Lambert material to it. I'll call it ref mat. I'll call this ref geo for the object itself. There we go. Now I'm going to animate the transparency so that we can quickly compare it to our other object once we have another object in here. So on the first frame, I'll set a key, and then I'll go to the last frame here. I'll turn the transparency all the way up to maximum, and I'll set another key. There we go. We won't really see it animating unless I zoom in here, just there's so many polygons on the wireframe. Let's take a look. There we go. That makes it a little bit clearer to see. So that works. We can also make a layer for it. I think this is really important. We want it to be really easy to toggle this on and off. So I'll make a layer. I'll call this ref layer. Now keep in mind I can toggle it over to template and reference mode, and then once it's in reference mode I won't be able to click on it and select it. So that'll make it easy for me to work on the new low poly object without accidentally selecting this. I'm also going to use that make live feature again, and that sort of helps by doing the same thing. But I think it's really useful to have it on a layer as well as using make live. Now I've got this rock in here, I shouldn't need the grid anymore, it'll just kind of be annoying in the way, so I'll temporarily turn that off. Now finally I'll just select this object, so take it out of reference mode first. Select this object and use modify make live to make that the live object. I'll also turn reference mode back on. Now I won't be able to select it, and this will also make it easy for us to bring in the other model and work on top of it. So I'll import it, the other starter model that I've created. Point out that normally when I import, I want to use this merge into selected namespace. Otherwise I get the file name in the name of every object and it shows up at the beginning, which is usually not what you want. So unless you have a complicated situation where you need something more complex happening for namespaces, usually it works fine just to merge into selected namespace. If you have a new object that conflicts with an old object in your scene, it'll just rename it, so it's just fine. So I'll import this. Okay, so here's my new object. I'll call this in-game. Remember to unlock the normals and soften the edges. Once I've done that, I'll delete the history again. So for deleting the history, I'm just pushing Alt, Shift, and then D on the keyboard. Remember, that's a really useful hotkey, and I just push that all the time. So whenever I say delete history, that's all I'm doing. I can also apply a new Lambert material to this starter object. I'm just going to change the tint of it slightly. This will just help me keep in mind that it's different than the other one. There you go. So when I see them both crashing, I'll be able to tell which is which a little bit easier this way. So now for editing this and getting this into an appropriate in-game version, there's a couple things we have to think about. The main one, really more important than anything else in this situation, is that it's not going to be smoothed using Camel Clark. So we don't really care if Camel Clark subdivision works on it. Remember, that's when we push 3 in Maya, or it's pretty similar to what happens when you actually hit divide in ZBrush. And it's that smoothing that rounds out the shape in this kind of a fashion. It's possible to do that in game engines, sometimes using tessellation and such, but even when you do, it tends to be done using different methods. Like, it's rare that they actually use Camel Clark to actually do that. They use some other mathematical method of doing it. So we don't really care precisely how it works with this. And one of the things that means is that we can just have crazy triangles all over the mesh. Chances are the game version is only going to see it as triangles anyway. A lot of game engines, they only import triangles in the first place. Some game engines don't understand quads in any capacity. Others do, but even in them you'll see a large mix of triangles and quads. Another consideration here is that this model isn't going to have to deform. It's a rock. It's going to stay pretty solid, so it doesn't really need to stretch or bend or animate, change shape in any capacity. If it was a character or even certain kinds of machines, I might have to worry about exactly how this would be edited or how it might deform. You need to think about a lot about what's going to happen in the context of your shot. For example, if this rock was shattering into a million pieces, I might be building this rock in a different way. But I'm building this rock, assuming it's just going to be a steady object in our shot or in our game, and it's not going to have to change shape or break apart or anything like that. So we really want to come up with the best representation of this particular shape. That means that I don't have to have extra edge loops that might help it deform, things like that. It's a lot simpler than if I'm working with a character or another model that I'm actually going to have to rig. And in those cases, I'd have to keep a lot of verts for rigging reasons and stuff like that. But here I'm able to wipe out any geometry that doesn't immediately help the shape. So the main thing that I'm actually concerned about here is I'm very concerned about the silhouette. Because the silhouette shape, look around here, without thinking of the wireframe on it, if we just think about the edges, what you'll notice is that inside it looks fairly smooth. And in fact, because later on I can use normal mapping on it, later on I can actually get all this part of the rock to look much more detailed than it really is. So all the parts that are sort of in the middle, whichever way I'm looking at it, all the parts that aren't sort of on the side, the silhouette of the object, anything that's more in the middle instead of on the silhouette, that stuff's going to be accounted for pretty well just with the normal map. So it's really more just that border on the side where the object ends, that silhouette. That's what I'm really worried about. So I can look at it from a lot of different angles. For example, I can see here that it looks really pointy there, right? And I might not actually want it to be that pointy. You're going to see that it's actually more of a rounded shape there. Similarly, if I look up at the top, right, I could really see that I'm not capturing the roundness there. Again, I'm seeing that. Viewers are going to notice that where you have these really sharp angular polygons. That's one of the sort of dead giveaways that it's a video game, particularly in older video games. So as you go farther back in history, things start being more and more low poly. And nowadays you should be able to have most things not looking angular. You should be able to get most things looking round, because most of our engines and such, even if you're building a game for a cell phone or something nowadays, you can round out a lot of objects pretty well. They don't need to look that terribly low poly usually. So that means that we can think about where we're going to put that roundness. So the main thing that I want to do right away is I want to establish where on this object it needs to be better, right? Where is the current roundness not going to be enough? So I'm just going to jump into face mode for that. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start selecting parts of this model that I think aren't round enough. I'm going to check our other version of the model here. So here's our reference. I'm going to be turning this off and on just so that I can get a better idea of what's happening. So this one doesn't necessarily need to be picked. I think I might have picked that one by accident. But we can see this part here, it's really angular. Same with that. That's pretty bad right there. This is probably pretty terrible as well. Yeah. I might ultimately want a little bit here. Just for now, I can skip that. I can keep in mind that later on I may go back and add a little bit there. So up here at the top, I was saying that that's a bit of a problem too. So let's think about that area. So, it's bad from every angle. It's bad this way, it's problematic that way. It's not too bad right from this angle, but it's not fantastic. I definitely want to break this up a little. These ones here probably aren't so important because there's not really any angle where I see it being a problem. It's not until I really get into that next one. So that'll be alright. Let's look at this part right here, because I think that's the last area that, really needs a lot of additional roundness that we don't have it. Yeah, and I can really see it from that. So let's see, is that going to be enough? have to ask myself if this part right here needs to be broken up better too. Yeah, maybe a little. I remember, you know, even if I add too much geometry back in with these parts, I can always take it away again. So I don't have to get this selection perfect. I just have to figure out some areas where I know I need to put more polygons in. That should do well. If I wanted to, I could create a quick selection set for this. So I go create sets, quick select sets. Areas needing more detail. I'll say QSS for quick select set. Okay. Now if I lose this, right, and now if I want to get this back, I can just go to Edit, Quick Select Sets, Areas Needing More Detail, and then I've got those same polygons selected again. So if you have a polygon selection that you care about and you need to go do other things for a little bit and get that selection back, then this is a really good way to do it. Okay. Now there might be more things in here that I could improve a little, but I think this is probably good enough. You know, I'm noticing right here I could potentially have something just because this particular angle isn't that good, but it's also not that terrible. I'm kind of looking at it from this angle. You know, again, there's a couple places where I might want to add a bit more, but I think I can always come back and do that later. So I think just for the moment I'll call this good enough. So for adding detail, the main methods that I'm going to use are I'm going to smooth parts of the object, which will be using Catmull-Clark subdivision, but just for specific parts of it. And that'll actually create real geometry that I can then work with. I'll be using the multi-cut tool in Maya, and I'll also be selecting edges and connecting them. So, you know, for example, if I select some edges this way, I can use connect, and I'd get some extra detail in there. I'll just put a vert in the center of every edge. So that's just, I'm doing that by holding down Shift and right-clicking, and then I go down here and I choose Connect Components. I could do that with verts also. If I just need to draw a quick line, I can just select a couple verts, hold down Shift, right-click, and I can use Connect Components there, and it'll just draw a little line there. And that's very similar to what I could do with the multi-cut tool. So if I just hold down Shift and I right-click in object mode, I go over it, I'll get the multi-cut tool, right? Then you see that I can do the same kind of thing in there. You know, sometimes it's faster to do it one way, sometimes it's faster to do the other. You know, with multi-cut, I really have to click exactly where I want it each time. You know, sometimes that's good, sometimes it's more than you need. I'm going to avoid just inserting edge loops and stuff like that. Most of the time, this is going to make too many polygons because it's going to put that edge all the way around everywhere, and I generally don't need it everywhere. I just need it in certain places. Right? If I needed it everywhere, I would just use a higher level in ZBrush. The whole point about this is that I'm being very selective of where I put the additional detail that I want. So I'll start by smoothing this. So let's get those areas that need more detail. I'll go up to Mesh here, and I'll use Smooth. And I'm going to go to the options, and if I just reset settings, you can see that the default here in newer versions of Maya is this Open Subdiv, Catmull-Clark. I'm just going to use the Maya Classic method, just because I know it's going to be really simple for a situation like this. I'm also going to turn off geometry borders and selection borders. And let's just try this. Should be good enough. There we go. So right away, you can see the silhouettes of our rock look a lot better. We don't see those extremely angular parts like we used to. There's a couple of angles. You know, that's a little bit of an angle right there. That's a bit of an angle right down there. They're not too bad, and also, you know, it might just be that some areas of the rock should be sharp, right? So that's okay. We really want to just decide on, you know, is an angle intentional, or is it there because it's unfortunately low poly looking and sort of wrong? You know, that's right down there. Yeah, it's definitely rounder. So let's just undo a couple times here. Go to face mode. So essentially I'm just undoing to back where I had this object a little bit simpler. Then I'll grab that area again, go to face mode. Right, notice that one part that didn't quite work well enough. Select those, and then use my smooth again. Make sure that all the settings are the way I had them. Great, it's smooth. Okay. So that works pretty well. Now in a lot of these places there's of course actually more polygons than I need. And also some of these places aren't very good in terms of, you know, actually being on the model. So we can go back and we can try to you know, fix those up in that capacity as well. But right off the bat we definitely get a really big improvement in a lot of the areas where we're working. Now we can go back, we can get rid of any extra lines that we don't need, because there's definitely additional useless detail in here. And then we can also start knocking out stuff in sections like this, where like this part's all flat, it basically can't affect the silhouette, or it doesn't affect it in any really important, meaningful way. So I can kind of simplify the back here. I won't do it too much, but you know, a little bit. And there's some other places where I can potentially, you know, just collapse some edges, and it won't really have any significant impact on the shape. So in a lot of places on this rock, I now have more detail than I want. So to get rid of detail, the main methods that I'm going to use are just to delete edges. So if I just go into edge mode here, I just push F10 and I click on an edge. I could also just go to edge mode, using the right mouse click menu, and I could choose an edge that way. If I want to get rid of that edge, a couple ways I can do it. I can hold down shift and right click and go to delete edge right here. That'll knock it out. I can also push control backspace. That'll get rid of the edge, and it'll also get rid of the vertex. If I don't want to eliminate that vertex that was on there, I can just push regular backspace. But then you're going to see it leaves this vert there, which is usually not what you want. So for the most part, what I'm going to be doing here is I'm just going to be selecting edges and hitting control backspace. So that works reasonably well there. So I'm asking myself, you know, if this one vert here is ever very useful, and you know, my answer I think to that is no. Just getting rid of that. This one here might be useful. It's hard for me to tell. It could be really useful just to deselect now and then, you know, orbit around and see how it works. Yeah. These ones where I've removed a bit, they're pretty minimal, so I could probably get away without that one too. I think I'll keep that one in there, just because that angle is going to be pretty commonly seen. Now, of course, I'm going to have to go back in there and clean a lot of this up. That's okay. I'm just thinking right now what stuff I can get away with removing. Right? Because there's a lot of places here where some of these little edges are not having any useful impact, and that just means that they're wasted geo. So. Like, is this useful? Like, almost certainly not, right there. So, look for things, and if you can't think of any reason for them to be there, wipe them out, and then look to see if it, had any, major impact on the shape. I think maybe I want, like, one of those edges here. Definitely not all of them. Maybe I can get rid of that one and that one. And this one, but not that edge. And that way, when I orbit around, I still get a little bit of an angle. I get a little bit of roundness from that one angle, and that's the only angle I think that I really need roundness there. Yeah, that'll be fine. In fact, I'm going to be able to go back later on and remove a lot of this. As I'm removing edges here, there's another method that I'm going to use to wipe out detail, and that's collapse. There's a lot of places here where collapsing would be good enough. And collapse just essentially takes an edge, and it moves both verts on that edge together until they become one vertex. So, for example, I can hold down Shift and right-click, go up here to Merge Collapse Edges, and then go to Collapse Edge. And that collapses that there, and that's probably fine. How about this one? Again, probably fine. I think I might leave that there. Pretty often it's useful just to bring a vert close to the other edge before you collapse it. So I could move this vert down in this direction, and then I can collapse the edge. There is another specific tool that essentially does that, which is the target weld tool. So if I want to merge that, then I can just drag that over there with that merge tool, and that'll fix it. So essentially I'm just holding down Shift, right-clicking, I'm going to go to Merge, and then Merge Vertex tool, which they also call the target weld tool, and then I can just click on this vert and drag it to this one, and it'll just merge those together. So now I can look at this side, and then I can ask myself, do I need that geometry there? That vert might actually be useful enough to keep. I think it is. So I think instead of getting rid of that one, I'll just build a couple of extra edges to support it. So remember that just connecting edges, if all you're doing is adding edges and you're not ultimately changing the vertex count or the triangle count of the model, because these are all going to be cut up into triangles anyway. So for example, if I select those and these, and I just hold down Shift and I right click and I use Connect Components, then I'll draw polygons in there in the appropriate way, and that's actually, I think, exactly the geometry that I want there. Yeah, that works pretty well. If you thought that one of these was going the wrong way, if you have essentially a quad which is cut up into two triangles with a line going between them, if you hold down Shift and you right click, another option that you can use is to spin the edge or flip it. And because this one only has two options, I imagine that flipping it will be fine. Spinning it in this case will do the same thing as flipping it, because it really only has a couple ways of being. There's not a lot that edge can do. But I actually think it was probably better the other way it was. But eventually we're going to have this where there's a lot of places on our model where it really matters exactly how it's triangulated. So we're going to want to go back in, and flip those edges appropriately. So I was just looking in this section and thinking about whether or not it should pop out more, and it really shouldn't. I was thinking about adding an extra edge in here or something, but it's actually supposed to be really flat there. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'm just going to take care that these verts kind of support the geometry around it well. But I'm just going to think about collapsing more for now. Essentially, the way we're thinking about this rock also is that this rock, could be sitting on the ground essentially, and then we wouldn't see the bottom of the rock. But the way I'm making this rock is I'm building this rock so that it can be used, just by rotating it and randomly placing it, anywhere. So I essentially do want this rock to look pretty good at any angle. The reason I can remove some detail from the bottom of the rock here, it's not because it's the bottom and because I won't see it or anything. It's not because of that. The reason I can get rid of a lot is just because it's so flat and that there's not a lot of shape to have to make in here. All that kind of shape, particularly a shape like this. This is a concave shape where the mesh essentially pokes in instead of poking out. So if it poked out, it would be like that, but if it's poked in, if I move it down that way, that makes it a really concave shape. And a lot of times those concave shapes, they can be simulated just fine with a normal map or something. They, if they're not too extreme, then they basically can't affect the silhouette of the object. Alright, so verts like that are a really good candidate for removal. So if I select that vert, I can hit Control Backspace and knock it out. And really, I can't really tell on these other ones either. Will I notice if I get rid of this edge? Probably not. This edge makes a tiny bit of shape, not very much. As long as I've still got that one vert back there, I think it's okay. Yeah, same over here. There's really a lot of opportunities to delete edges down here. About that one. Yeah, no, I don't need that one either. So this is like one of the only ones I need, because this is the only part that really sticks up and makes a shape. There. The rest of it is so simple. Well, this part sticks up a little bit, so I'm not going to remove that edge. Now there's quite a bit of extra detail in here. It might be worth just collapsing out a couple of those edges instead. Let's try that. Is that close enough? I think probably it is. This vert can go over here. So again, I can just use that target weld vert tool. So merge vertex tool. Let's just grab this, go over there. A couple of those straggler verts. Let's just grab them and move them over in the same way. So that's working pretty well. I could potentially get rid of a couple more. I don't think I'd want to get rid of much more, though. This is pretty close to where I'd like it to be, just because it preserves enough of the shape while still getting rid of enough of the detail there. So I'll just continue in here, just removing extra detail that I don't need. I can get away with getting rid of that, and, that's not necessary. Let's just collapse these out here first. There's a tiny impact on the silhouette from that one angle. Maybe it's better just to start by removing that and that. Yeah, that's probably a little bit better. I do notice right here that this quad is cut in kind of a funny fashion. If I go back to the model here, it's not really supposed to have that gap there. If I look at a reference model, that just means the triangle is cutting in the wrong way across that, right? So remember, whenever I have that, I can just connect it across and just make sure the triangle edge is going in the right direction. And you're going to get that a lot, so just make sure you connect those up in sensible ways. Remember, if the last command you used you want to repeat, just push G and you can repeat that command. Okay, that's working reasonably well. Now sometimes you're going to get these really funny shading edges. That's because a lot of times when you connect or you cut things, it's not going to make it all soft edges. So just select your model and use normal soften edge. And then we get a soft edge there. The other option, of course, sometimes people will just like to see what their model looks like with hard edges everywhere. Sometimes it can be helpful just to see your model like this. Keep in mind that most of the time, in-game, your model is going to be all soft edges. Hard edges are actually more expensive, generally speaking, in game engines. So, now, I was mentioning before that I might want to have just one extra polygon in there. So I might come back and cut that. But I'll leave it for now, see how big of an issue it is in context of the entire rock at the end here. I'll just soften it all again, because I normally prefer to just work with it soft and make sense of the wireframe myself. So I'll delete the history again. So just continually delete the history as you're doing this. So I can see like these here, they actually kind of do affect the silhouette from the bottom. So I think I'll kind of leave them in there. Of course, the question is, do they affect it enough? They might not. But if I'm really stressed for poly counts later, and I really am trying to reduce this, and I'm sort of over budget or something, then I can go back and I can get rid of some polygons there. But when you smooth out, you tend to get a lot more polygons than you need. So very often you want to go back and remove a lot from areas where you smooth stuff out. But often it gets you close. This shape here was contributing to the silhouette, but possibly not in a good way. So I'll just take it back a little. Hit the wrong button there, I'm not sure what that was. So let's just use connect components again. So essentially I'm just using repeat over and over again. Sometimes shapes like this are fine. This is called a triangle fan, where you have a whole bunch of triangles coming out at one point. There are times when that is the best way to make a given shape. You could do this in an in-game model, where as you would never do this on a Camel-Clark model, because that would create a vertex pull where you have more than 5 edges going into a vertex, which is something, of course, you never want in like a ZBrush model or something. But for the in-game version, if that's the best shape, if none of the other ways to cut the triangles across make it a better shape, then go with that shape. Just use whatever gets you the best shape out of that. So this one here I may have cut across the wrong way, so let's just try to think what is the best way to cut this one. Does it actually make more sense across that way? It might. Let's look. Was that more conductive to the shape? I think it is. So I'll go with that. So one reason I'm not letting the computer do this is because I'm really trying to control exactly how it puts these edges in. I could just select a bunch of faces and hit triangulate, but if I do that, the computer might make choices that I don't really agree with. So, depending on how much time you have, you can decide to, do this. Or if there's situations where you just don't care, and you have 5-sided polygons, this works particularly well if they're really flat. I can use just mesh and triangulate. So right here, sometimes the computer will do it just fine. There's other times where what it does isn't really what you end up wanting. So you can also just triangulate and then flip afterwards. There's a lot of various methods you might decide to use. Let's try triangulate on a few of these here. And then even if they don't work, we can just try spinning some edges. So, essentially these are all 5-sided polygons that I don't want. So. I think that's a bit of a funny edge there. Yeah, that looks better. Same with that one. So sometimes, after it triangulates it, you'll find you spend more time just fixing up its triangulation, than you saved. The computer won't necessarily make the best choices when it triangulates. This polygon down here I triangulated kind of strangely. I could try connecting that across directly, but it might have actually been better the way it was. Let's just see. It was kind of an extremely concave shape there anyway. So I think just because this is a little more regular, I'll leave it like this for now. This is probably going to support the UVs better and stuff like that, but it would have been okay the other way just because of the actual shape that this had, but I'll try putting it back that way now. So yeah, still going in there, and I'm still finding edges that aren't really contributing to the shape in any useful way, so just continuing to knock those out. That's a useless edge. That's a useless edge too. So is that. This one's useful. It really helps the silhouette down there. I'll keep it. Let's go back and try to connect these in ways that make sense. Now it is okay to leave, quads. If it doesn't make a big difference which way the triangle flips across it, then I'll generally leave it as a quad. And then I will use triangulate at the end, or take a look at how the game engine triangulates it. Having a lot of quads in the model will help other artists on your team work with it easier. So I don't just break it down into, all triangles, even if it is going to be all triangles in-game, because very often it's useful for everyone else to actually have stuff there. But where I think it does matter, I think it's important that this quad gets triangulated that way, I'll do it. Maya's sometimes going to do a good job triangulating it, and sometimes other programs are going to do well, but you can't always trust them, so it's important that you think about it, and you think about how much it matters. What if the computer gets it wrong? That's essentially the main reason why I'm putting in a lot of triangles here, is because, yeah, the computer could triangulate it, but is the computer going to do a good job? Pretty often the answer is no, the computer's not going to do a good job. So I probably could have even gotten rid of that edge, so if that's the case. Let's try it. Let's see if that's good enough. Yeah, that's fine. By the time I orbit over here, I can't even see that part of the silhouette anyway. So I feel like this is mostly going pretty well. Definitely some more places where I, could definitely edit this and get some stuff a little bit more on model. One problem is, of course, a lot of these parts that have been smoothed have really slipped off the model. So go back here, right? You're going to see the model grows a little bit. So at some point here, it's going to be really important to, be projecting these vertices back onto the model. I have a tool that I've written myself that I usually use to do this, and it's part of my MMMM tools script system. But since I'm not using that yet in these, what we can do instead is we can just shoot this back into ZBrush. That'll also give us a chance to, get it back down to a simple quads and tries and make sure there's no 5-sided polygons or anything on it. So let's try doing that. So I'll just take this model here and export it as an OBJ. I just overwrite my rock starter since at this point rock starter is garbage. So of course in ZBrush, there's old rock. If I want to bring this in, I'm going to need a new subtool. So I'm just going to use append. Got the old polystar here. There we go. Import in the rock starter. Now here, it's going to complain because there are a few parts where I still had five-sided faces. And ZBrush is only going to work with quads and triangles. So I can actually do this, and I can tell ZBrush to split it into quads and triangles right now. And I'll try that. And then any 5-sided faces are going to get cut up, and for the most part, that didn't really make a really serious difference. But I'd have to think about whether or not it made any triangles that I didn't like. If it cut up any of those polygons in sort of a bad way. I think they're all fine though, so it'll be fine. I do want to project all this back onto my proper model because some of these have slipped off the model a bit. So I'm just going to save this subtool first. There we go. Then I'm going to go back up here and then make sure that my high poly rock is at a high enough poly count that I'm projecting to the proper details in it. And then I'm going to come back into this starter rock. And I do have solo mode on, so I'm only seeing the starter rock at a time. But I need to make sure that my high poly there actually is visible. So click the eye there while you've got the starter rock selected. Good, that should work fine. So now I can use project. I'm going to have to turn my distance up a little there. Let's project. Make sure that that's working okay. Now, of course, you can cheat a little bit. You might decide that you don't like how spiky it is in certain places. So I don't always project everything absolutely 100%. It's possible to go back in Maya and cheat them off just a little bit, and that could be okay. But often I usually want most of it projected pretty close. You can see up here there's actually a bit of a shape that gets created in kind of a cool way now that it's projected, right? We had lost that before in the model. It didn't really have that dip in it, right? Now it's got that proper dip in there again. This is pretty good. So if I like that, the way that that's going, then I'll just export that again. And again, I'll just overwrite rock starter. Go back into Maya. I'm just going to save my Maya scene to be extra careful. But I can just delete rock starter and import rock starter again. Now, if it's complaining here about multiple groups or something, a lot of situations it makes sense to export without groups in ZRush, and I think this is one of those situations where there's no real reason to export with groups. Try this again. Another option, if I don't actually want to export it again, is in the import settings themselves. If I grab that rock starter, so if I go into this file type specific options, and if I actually have OBJ chosen in here, it'll actually give me the option for a single object, and I can say import. Yeah, and then it doesn't complain. So you can do it either way. Sometimes there's good reason to have that grouping information, but in this situation, it's just a single object. There's no sense in having any of that. So I'll call this in-game again. Okay. And remember, I have to unlock the normals and soften the edges. Okay. So a couple of these forms, if I think they were just a bit much, I can back them off a little bit. Mostly is working pretty well though. So let's go in here, seeing if there's anything that really kind of bothers me, any of these silhouettes. And if it does, I'll go in and I'll add more. If there's any sections that seem really wasteful, of course I can take away. Normally, you're going to keep reducing this, you're going to keep knocking edges out until you get around your triangle budget. And the fact is, in that case, if you have a budget and you have to make it a certain polygon count, then you're just going to keep removing edges, even if you think they are important. You're just gonna remove the least important ones, because you're gonna get to a point where essentially every edge is important, and it just becomes a question of how important is it. You just keep going in there and just keep knocking out more and more geometry, collapsing, removing edges. Until you get it down to what it needs to be. I mean, if I could keep collapsing and removing edges until this was basically a cube, and you're gonna have lots of situations where you have to do that, and that's fine. If this was in a game, I would probably make multiple levels of detail for lower poly versions of this rock when it was far away, and then even if this rock, is 800 polys or something like that, then when the rock goes farther away, the game engine can swap in another rock that is 400 polys, and then 200 polys, or whatever. Now in this situation, we don't really have an exact poly count, so I can just kind of go for where, what polygons do I think are worthwhile, and then I can just say that, this particular poly count in here, which is around 400 verts, 800 triangles, that this is going to work for us. So I think we'll call this good enough for this version of the rock, because I think we've captured all the detail on it. We really could collapse a few more edges in here, but since we don't have an exact budget, and such, I think essentially it's all pretty reasonable at this point. There's nothing completely insane on this model. So we're going to have to go in and we're going to have to think about the UVs on this model, because they are probably not very good. Very often while you're doing this, you will break a lot of the UV mapping. So, if we have to change the UVs considerably, that's okay. We just have to think about it. So, here's our UVs, and I could try running an unfold again. Let's see what we get. I'll select some UVs here, go hold down Control, right click, go to shell. I push E for rotate, and I can spin them around. Try moving them. I'm trying to get this to be more similar to the way we had it before, but of course it doesn't actually have to be. Now remember, it's really important that there's a tiny little bit of space between the islands. So it's not too bad. I don't like to have any verts exactly touching the edge either, because remember you can get bleeding happening from one edge of your picture to the other edge. So let's see how much room we have at the top, and it looks like we have enough room that we can move that up a little bit. How much padding you can really take is really a function of how much resolution you're going to have in your final texture map, and you need less space between things when you have more resolution in the map. If you need to, it's okay to cheat a little and move some points just a bit. Just a really gradual little adjustment there. I don't think that'll be fine. I can check our V-grid and take a look at it. No immediate apparent problems. Should be fine. Now I might be able to make better use of this space here if I ripped the rock apart into more pieces. I don't think I'm going to go that far. This mapping isn't necessarily optimized for in-game use. At the moment, the UVs, they're a little bit wasteful, right? If I create a few more seams on this object, I can probably use up a lot more of the texture space there, because I have a lot of wasted background space in the UV editor where there's no polygons. Like all this section here, whatever that texture is just complete waste. Same thing with some of the other parts. So, it would potentially be possible for me to break this apart into more sections. So if I didn't like that mapping and I really wanted to, make some better mapping and have it less wasteful, then I can go in and I can make some new sections on here. So to do this, I'm just going to go into face mode. And I'm going to start selecting, and paint selection is going to be really useful in this mode. So I can double click my select tool, and I'm going to go from marquee to drag here. And now if I click on it, I just drag it, so to get a paint selection mode, where I can just drag across it and select it really quickly. Also temporarily, seeing the UVs on the object like that, actually seeing the texture test isn't really useful, so I'll just turn that off temporarily. So let's figure out what we can do here. So I think I'll leave that for the other side. I'll grab all this. And this here. take away a little up here. Guess I can leave that into another part. Yeah, that should be okay. So that's one side. So I'll just take this whole section here, so create UVs, planar mapping. And again, it doesn't even matter if this is good, but if I look at it and I do the planar mapping, I can just say from camera, keep image width, height ratio. You know, I can give it sort of the best shot at it that I can. Remember, I'm just going to use unfold after this anyway, so it's not a big problem if this mapping isn't very good. What I'm really just doing is using the planar to actually create seams where I want them. So if I want to actually see the seams, I can say display, polygons, texture border edges. Okay, and I can see those seams a little bit better. I can go in here and cut another border edge on that one. So edit UVs, cut UV edges. Right? And here I'm kind of working with the existing edges, right? I'm not totally replacing them. Let's cut another one down here. And the whole purpose of planar mapping, and the last way this is just that it put that edge there, right? When you planar map a section, it'll get rid of any seams on the inside of that section, and it'll put a new seam around the outside of that section. Okay, so let's see if we can make UVs that are a little bit less wasteful with these new seams. So let's go to this whole model, unfold the entire thing. Polygons, unfold, options. I can do it again, but I didn't like the way it did it the first time. Let's try this again. Yeah, there we go. So it might be possible to arrange these in a way significantly better than the way it did the first one. So if that's the case, I'll go in here. Let's see if I can scale them up a little bit. You know, it's not really worthwhile if I can't scale them up a little bit, because it means that I'm not getting very good resolution in there. You know, if the computer's way of fitting it together is the absolute best way of fitting it together, you're probably not doing a very good job. There's probably some other way you can cut it up. I usually try to take the biggest pieces first and stack them into the corners, and then I try to wedge the other pieces in there somehow. This is essentially putting a puzzle together. Hoping you have enough room, because you don't necessarily, you know. And if I don't, it means I have to scale it down again. And of course, you can always see how things only a little bit. I have to ask myself, you know, is there a good amount where this works? And where it's substantially less wasteful than the last way that I had it. Yeah, and I'll be able to do something like this. So it's definitely a lot less wasteful in terms of texture space than the last one was. it is a little bit I mean, I've got overlaps right there, so I do have to sort that out a little. So I can just select everything, scale it down a tiny bit, and then see if I'm able to sort that back out again just by moving those pieces. Well, this might actually work better if I move this down here. And then take this chunk and put it over here. Yeah. I think that works, reasonably well. So just continuing to edit this a little. Maybe we got more space if I turn it that way. Okay. These verts are pushed off just a little bit, but there's no reason I can't just cheat these in a little. So let's do that, because everything else on the model is working pretty well, and that was such a minor little cheat there. It's a pretty tiny change. No one's going to notice that all that much. It's not really going to be visible in the final textures, and it gives us pretty efficient use of the texture space there. You're going to get to sections like this where, unless you cut it up into a lot more pieces, you can't really move them around any better. So we'll go with that. Okay, so let's get our ZBrush model matched up to this. So just export over the rock starter yet again, and then I'll go back to ZBrush. Import over it. There we go. And now if I go to the UV map section here, I can go to Morph UV. And if I spin around, if I look at it at the right angle, I can eventually see the UVs the way that I made them in Maya. Remember, they're always funny and flipped and weird looking in ZBrush, so that's fine. That's just the way ZBrush is. The UVs are actually okay. ZBrush just kind of shows them all messed up like this. If you export to Inform, if I go back to Maya, all the UVs are still where I want them in Maya, so it's all good. Okay, so I'll call this my rock in-game. I'll call the other one my rock detail. There we go. And I'll save this Z tool again. So now I have a low poly rock that works pretty well. Right? If I turn it off, it really feels like it has most of our detail there. It's drastically better looking than if I go all the way down here. So here's our low poly here's our the lowest subdivision level, I should say, of our detailed object, right? Which is fairly low poly. But of course, it looks really angular and blocky and like terrible looking in a lot of these edges, right? So if I toggle back and forth, right, that looks a lot better than this. in terms of how much detail it feels like it's capturing. And even if I go up a level, so here, this is even more points. All right, so we're substantially less. All right. So if we look at our count up here, right, there's our detailed rock. And that's going to be around 2,000 triangles. Well, maybe looks like it says about 1,500. Still a lot more than our low one, which right now is around 750. So it's a lot more efficient. It's a lot less polygons, but it pretty much looks just as good. If we look at the silhouette and we ignore kind of the inside of the object, right? The silhouettes are pretty similar. I'm not losing a lot along the silhouette. I'm losing maybe a little bit here and there, but it's pretty minor. I can see I didn't really capture that one spot of the shape. So we could go back and forth and deal with this. And of course, you could spend a very long time making this as perfect as you possibly could. At some point you're going to say it's good enough and you're going to move on. And I think for this lesson, at this point we'll call this low poly version of the rock good enough, and we'll move on to baking. So there's our low poly in-game version of the model, which is now matching up reasonably well with our detailed version of the model. It has very different UVs. That's okay for baking purposes in this situation. There are times when you might want the UVs to match up better, but in this situation it shouldn't really matter. As long as we bake all the textures and everything fine, then our baked textures should cause the seams to be pretty unnoticeable, and we should be able to get sort of better texture resolution across the object as a whole, because those UVs are sort of scaled up and they're bigger than the UVs on the more detailed model would be. Because I'm sort of using more of the texture space, I'm not wasting as much of it. So that's the end of this lesson, and for the next lesson I'll discuss baking and how to bake a normal map so that we get all the detail from our detailed version and apply it to our low poly version without actually making any more polygons. We just apply it as a texture that makes it look like it has all of this detail. So the next couple lessons will be on baking, and see you then.